She wasn't a thief. She wasn't a liar. But under the scorching sun, with ropes biting deep into her wrists, Nayeli, the last proud daughter of an Apache line, stood accused by a town that never saw her truth. They didn't tie her up for stealing, they did it to silence her. The sun wasn't just hot, it was punishing. It beat down like justice gone wrong, peeling skin and pride with every hour that passed. Nayeli's arms were stretched high above her head, bound to a cracked timber post in the center of Dustrock's dusty square. Her wrists were raw, the rope cutting deeper with each twitch. Sweat traced down her back in rivulets, stinging every fresh welt, every sunburnt inch of her skin. She stood there, half broken but unbent, surrounded by faces she once knew, faces that now wouldn't meet her eyes. The same women who traded cornmeal with her mother. The same men who once nodded as she rode past. Now they stared like she was less than dirt. "Thief," one man spat. "Let her rot," came another voice, hard and bitter like cheap whiskey. "Apache trouble," someone muttered low. Her throat was dry as cotton. She wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. Her lips cracked when she tried. Her legs were shaking, barely keeping her upright. But she wouldn't kneel. Not for them. A boy, maybe 12, stepped forward from the crowd. She remembered him. His name used to be Teddy. He once gave her a feather he found in the canyon. Now he hurled a rock. It struck her shoulder, sending a ripple of pain through her body. The crowd didn't stop him. No one did. She closed her eyes, letting the pain dull into background noise. What hurt more was the shame, not her own, but theirs, painted across her like war paint she never chose. And in that burning silence, memories came flooding back, sharp, jagged. Wade. Son of Thomas Harrington, the rancher who owned more land than any man west of the river. Wade had cornered her behind the cattle pen 3 nights ago, breath sour with booze, hands rough with greed. She said no. Pushed him away. He didn't like that. And wouldn't you know it, come morning, cattle went missing. And a whisper began winding its way through the town like a rattlesnake, the Apache girl did it. By sundown, they tied her up without trial. Now the sun kept climbing, unforgiving as a hanging judge. Flies crawled over her face. She couldn't even lift a hand to swat them. Her knees buckled once, but the ropes caught her, pulling her upright like a puppet strung up for show. "Please," her voice cracked like dry wood. "I didn't." No one listened. The sheriff? Nowhere in sight. The preacher? Silent. Her people? Driven out or too afraid to speak. Nayeli was alone. Except she wasn't. Not completely. Across the square, near the blacksmith's, a man stood still. Broad shoulders. Hat pulled low. Dust-covered boots planted firm in the dirt. Boone. And he hadn't taken his eyes off her since the crowd gathered. Boone had seen plenty of ugly things in his life, droughts that took the land, bandits that took what wasn't theirs, and sheriffs too scared to speak when power barked louder than the law. But what he saw now, in that sun-blasted town square, turned his stomach. A girl. Apache. Tied like a trophy in front of folks who'd long lost their souls. Nayeli's face was streaked with sweat and dust, but her eyes still had fight in them. That's what got him. He spat into the dirt, adjusted the brim of his hat, and stepped off the porch of the blacksmith's shop. The crowd didn't notice him at first. They were too busy gawking at their shame like it was some kind of fairground spectacle. He walked slow, measured. Each bootfall kicked up a puff of red earth. A wind stirred, lazy and hot. He stopped about 10 feet from her, close enough to see how the rope had chewed up her wrists. She turned her head. Their eyes met. "You all right, miss?" he asked, voice low, gravel thick. Nayeli's lips moved. No sound came out. But her eyes said it plain, "Don't let me die here." Boone didn't wait for permission. He stepped up to the post and reached for the knot. That's when he heard the voice behind him. "Step away, Boone." He didn't need to turn to know who it was. That drawl could sour milk. Wade. Swaggering up like he owned the damn ground he walked on. His shirt was too clean. His boots too polished. Trouble dressed like a gentleman. Behind him lumbered Hank, wide as a barn door and just as dumb, gripping a hickory stick like he was hoping for a reason to swing it. Boone stood still, hands still on the knot. "You deaf?" Wade sneered. "She stays put." Boone turned, slow as molasses. His voice didn't rise. "Didn't need to. You've had your fun. It ends now." The crowd stirred. Tension curled in the air like gun smoke before a draw. Wade stepped closer, thumb tapping the handle of the knife on his belt. "You think this town's gonna side with a half-blood girl and some dirt-scratching rancher? You best rethink that." Boone didn't blink. His eyes locked on Wade's like steel catching fire. "I ain't here for the town. I'm here for what's right." Then, from behind him, came the voice he wasn't expecting. Ragged, hoarse, but fierce as wildfire. "You liar." Nayeli gasped. "You tried to take me. When I said no, you set this whole damn thing up." A silence cut through the square sharper than any knife. Boone didn't look back, but he felt the shift. The crowd was listening now. Even the wind seemed to pause. Wade's jaw clenched. His hand twitched near his blade. Boone saw it coming before it happened. Hank moved first, just like a big ox would. He swung the stick, aiming for Boone's head. But Boone was faster. He caught the swing mid-air with one hand and drove his shoulder square into Hank's chest. The big man stumbled back, coughing, crashing to the ground like a sack of flour. Wade drew steel. Boone straightened, calm as Sunday prayer, eyes never leaving his. Wade's knife caught the sun just right as it came free from the sheath on his belt, gleaming, wicked, and personal. The blade wasn't just for show. It had a story. And Boone knew it. But this wasn't about a knife. It was about power. About shame. About a man who'd been told no and couldn't stand it. Wade lunged with a snarl. Boone sidestepped like he'd been in a dozen bar fights, which he had, and caught Wade's wrist mid-swing. The knife stopped inches from Boone's ribs. His grip tightened like a vice. With a hard twist, Wade yelped, and the blade clattered to the dirt. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some folks flinched. Others leaned in. Wade didn't retreat. His pride was louder than his pain. He swung again, bare-fisted now, wild and sloppy. Boone took one hit on the shoulder, stepped in, and let his own right fist fly, square to Wade's jaw. The younger man dropped like a sack of spoiled potatoes. Dust rose around him. His lip was split. His eyes dazed. Boone stood over him, chest heaving, boots rooted in the earth like he'd grown there. He didn't gloat. Didn't speak. He just bent down and picked up the knife. The handle was worn smooth from use, but on one side, the carved W burned deep into the wood, Wade's mark. No mistaking it. He turned to the crowd. Held the blade high. "This was found by the cattle fence," Boone said, voice rough but steady. She saw him drop it. And today, he brought it to finish the job. Eyes darted. Feet shuffled. The crowd wasn't so loud now. Behind Boone, Nayeli's voice cracked through the silence, tired but ironclad. "He tried to force me. I said no. Then he blamed me. That's the whole truth." Wade groaned in the dirt, spitting blood. His face twisted, not from pain, but fury. Humiliation. His hands curled into fists again, but he didn't move. Not this time. Boone stepped closer, lowering the knife so only Wade could see the blade's tip pointing down. "You set her up," he said coldly. "Thought no one stand in your way. You were wrong." Hank, still sprawled in the dirt a few feet away, tried to push himself up. He didn't get far. His breath came in wheezes, ribs likely bruised. The tension in the air was heavy as a rainless storm. But the crowd, they were different now. Something had cracked. They weren't cheering. They weren't laughing. Some looked away in shame. Others stared at Wade like they didn't quite recognize him anymore. Boone turned to Nayeli, still tied, still trembling, but her chin lifted with something close to defiance. He moved to her side, cut the final knot, and caught her before she collapsed. Her weight was light, too light. But her spirit? Unbroken. She looked up at him, lips trembling. "Tell them," she whispered. "They need to see it." Boone nodded and lifted the knife again. "Sheriff Cole's gonna want a word," he said loud enough for all to hear. "And I reckon this blade'll speak plenty." The sun was sinking low when Boone slung Nayeli up into his saddle. She didn't weigh much, she'd lost too much blood, too much water, too much of everything, but she stayed upright, clinging to the horn with fingers rubbed raw. Boone swung up behind her and gave the reins a gentle shake. The horse stepped forward, hooves thudding steady against the dry earth. Behind them, Wade didn't say a word. He just sat in the dust, lips split, pride leaking out slower than the blood on his chin. Hank was still groaning, his breath shallow, his fight long gone. The townsfolk parted as Boone rode through. No one stopped them. No one dared. Dustrock's sheriff's office wasn't far, but that ride felt like a mile-long prayer. Boone kept one arm around Nayeli to steady her, the other gripping the knife with the carved W in his belt. She leaned her head against his chest, voice soft as a whisper in the wind. "You think he'll believe me?" Boone didn't answer right away. He wasn't a man for false hope. "If Cole's still got a backbone," he muttered, "then yeah. He'll hear you out." The sheriff's office stood at the end of Main Street, its wood siding cracked from sun and time. A rusty star hung crooked above the door. Boone swung down, helped Nayeli off the horse, and half-carried her inside. Sheriff Cole looked up from his desk, booted feet on the table, chewing the stub of an unlit cigar. When he saw Nayeli's condition, her blistered skin, the dried blood on her arms, his eyes went wide. "Lord above," he breathed. "What the hell happened to her?" Boone said nothing at first. He reached into his belt and laid the knife on the desk, blade out, handle turned toward the lawman. "She was strung up like a thief," Boone said, voice flat. "Nearly cooked under the sun. No judge. No trial. Just mob justice. And that knife? That's Wade's. She saw him drop it at the cattle fence. He came at her today, blade in hand." Cole sat up straighter. The weight in the room shifted. Nayeli spoke then. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "He tried to force himself on me. I said no. Then cattle went missing, and suddenly I'm the villain." Cole picked up the knife, turned it over in his hands. The W was deep, unmistakable. He leaned back in his chair. The old wood creaked under him. "You know who his daddy is," he said. "You know how much sway the Harrington name carries in this town." Boone stepped forward, his shadow crossing the desk. "And you know me, Cole. You know I don't bring trouble unless it's already spilled into the street." The sheriff looked from Boone to Nayeli, and something passed behind his eyes, regret, maybe. Or something heavier. He nodded, slow as syrup. "I'll take this to the council. But you'd best brace yourselves. Wade's father ain't gonna let this go quiet." Boone nodded back. "Good. We ain't stayin' quiet either." Cole sighed, tossed the cigar stub aside, and reached for his hat. The law had just been stirred from its slumber. By nightfall, word had spread faster than wildfire through Dustrock. The Apache girl. The knife. Boone's fist laid clean into Wade Harrington's smug jaw. Folks hadn't seen that much excitement since the river flooded 2 summers ago. The town council, usually a place for cattle disputes and fence line arguments, was lit up like Christmas. Lamplight spilled out through the windows. Every seat inside the old church hall was taken, and the rest stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls. Wade sat at the front, his face bruised, his bottom lip split. He didn't look so proud now. Sitting beside him was Thomas Harrington, his father, stiff as a fence post and twice as bitter. He scanned the room like he owned every soul in it. Truth be told, he nearly did. But not tonight. Because sitting on the other side, hands folded in her lap, was Nayeli, dressed in borrowed clothes, her hair still dusty, but her eyes burned clear. And behind her stood Boone, silent and still, like a mountain that wasn't about to move for anybody. Sheriff Cole laid the knife on the council table, the carved W catching the lantern light. "This here's what was found by the cattle fence," Cole said, voice steady. The girl saw Wade drop it. "She says he tried to force her. When she refused, he turned the town against her." The room went quiet. No coughs. No murmurs. Just the heavy sound of a lie starting to fall apart. One of the councilmen, a squat old rancher named Burke, cleared his throat. "Is this true, girl?" he asked. Nayeli stood. Her legs shook at first, but her voice didn't. "I didn't steal anything. I didn't lie. I didn't raise a hand to no one. The only thing I did wrong in some folks' eyes, was saying no." The words hit harder than a bullet. Some folks looked down. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth. Others, those who'd shouted "thief" that morning, now avoided her gaze. Thomas Harrington slammed a fist on the bench. "You people gonna take the word of an Apache girl over my son?" he barked. Boone took one step forward. "Your son used her up like she was dirt," he said. "Then tried to bury her in it." The councilman at the center leaned forward. "Enough shouting. We're here for facts. And that knife's more than enough for me." Sheriff Cole nodded, slow. "Luke Wade Harrington," he said, using the boy's full name like a gavel, "you'll answer for this." Wade's face twisted, but he didn't fight. Not with Boone's eyes locked on him like a hawk watching a rabbit. And just like that, the tide turned. Nayeli didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just exhaled, long and deep, like someone finally let her breathe. Outside, the wind blew soft through the mesquite trees. But inside that little town hall, something harder moved: justice. By morning, the town square looked different. Not cleaner. Not prettier. Just, quieter. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm breaks something open. Dust still clung to the windows. A few folks swept their porches like nothing had happened. But something had. Something had cracked, and Dustrock would never be quite the same. Sheriff Cole had left the town council with orders: Wade Harrington would be placed under investigation. It wasn't a trial yet, but it was the first time the Harrington name got put on paper for something dirty. Thomas Harrington had stormed out red-faced, growling lawsuits and revenge, but no one followed him. No one cheered. Just silence and boots shuffling against wood. Meanwhile, Boone helped Nayeli back to her people. Her tribe had camped out 2 ridges east of town, in a clearing ringed by cottonwoods. They'd heard about what happened. They'd heard, and they'd waited. Boone helped her off the saddle, slow and careful. She stood on her own now, legs shaky but firm. Her people stepped forward, faces solemn, proud. One elder woman cupped Nayeli's cheeks, whispering something in Apache too soft to catch. Boone tipped his hat and turned to leave. "You ain't stayin'?" she asked behind him. He paused, looked back over his shoulder. "This was your fight," he said. I just held the rope while you climbed. She stepped closer, eyes locking with his. No one else did. Boone didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the horizon, where the sky was burning orange with daybreak. Town's got a long road ahead. They'll have to figure out what kind of folks they really are. And you? She asked. Me? He gave a half-smile. I'm just a rancher. Dirt, cattle, coffee too strong for most folks. But if the wind ever turns mean again, I'll be around. She nodded once, slow and sure. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small carved feather, a charm of protection, Apache made, and pressed it into his palm. For the road. In case it gets rough. Boone looked down at it. A simple thing, light as a whisper. But it felt heavy with meaning. He closed his fist around it. Reckon I'll keep that close. They didn't hug. Didn't kiss. That wasn't their way. But when Boone rode off, he didn't look back. And he didn't need to. Nayeli stood taller than she had in days. Not because the ropes were gone, but because her truth had been seen, and she hadn't bent to break. The wind picked up. The sun rose. And somewhere between the rustle of cottonwoods and the steady beat of hooves fading into distance, a new story began to take root in Dustrock. One where folks maybe, just maybe, would think twice before letting fear drown out what's right. In these lands, justice don't ride fast. But when it comes, it leaves footprints that don't wash away easy. If this story meant something to you, remember this: sometimes it only takes one voice to stop the engine, one man to cut the rope, and one woman to stand back up. And if you want more stories of grit, heart, and hard choices, don't ride off just yet. Subscribe. We've got more tales down the trail. Cowboy Hat Face.